everyone, it is me, Game Penguin 21, and today, well, must be one of those cold days in hell, because I agree with at least some of the PlayStation fanboys that I tend to make fun of. Yes, I know it happens on a rare occasion, but I think this is something that a lot of people have been discussing, and I have been avoiding the conversation mainly out of the fact that I don't want to lose friends. But in the end, I kind of have to talk about it because there's nothing really else to talk about. Now, the main thing I'm going to use for this is I'm going to be using a very small article from Niche, whatever the heck it's called, Gaming. It's a smaller gaming publication, and yes, normally games journalism isn't the best, but these guys seem to be a little bit more based, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But of course, got to do a little bit of shilling before we continue this. 1K subscribers by the end of the year, please and thank you. It would be amazing. I'm trying to make that push. I know we can do it. I really appreciate everyone who subscribes and likes and comments and does all the stuff. I try to respond to everything, or at least try to see the responses there, because I know all of you are great. And thank you. If you want to see more of me, I do stream on Twitch, mostly on the weekends. Do make sure that you follow me on the twitch.tv/GamePenguin21. And if you want any of the music and things that I actually produce, links down to all that in the Bandcamp in the description down below. So, thank you very, very much. Anyway, so what am I talking about here today? So, from the Hazard Gamen Dragon Dujuzuma, I am very bad at names, so please excuse me if I'm completely just butchered that, my mistake. They say that Microsoft urges developers not to create female characters with, quote, exaggerated body proportions on their official site to support game devs. The site is titled as Product Inclusion Action, help customers feel seen. Now, of course, this is referencing the article, and what the heck do I mean by this? Well, this is also retweeted by Japan Hates Xbox in a more very bad way. I probably won't show that, but there is a lot of people throwing this article around, so might as well talk about it because it's a smaller video, and more often than not, the smaller videos usually get pushed to Thursday. In any case, let's actually take a look at this article, posted by the Niche Gamer staff on March 25th, 2024. And the title is, as it says, Microsoft cautions developers to avoid curvy female characters. And yeah, and it uses like a picture of Stellar Blade, and this beginning bit here starts to read, Microsoft urges developers do not to create female characters with, quote, exaggerated body proportions on their official support game devs. The site is titled Product Inclusion Action, help customers feel seen, includes a bucket list of considerations that urge developers to make when working on their product. One Twitter user pointed out that the language is expressively condemning certain female characters as reinforcing, quote, negative gender stereotypes. Now, again, what does all of this have to do with the current situation and things? So let's back up just a teeny tiny bit. So the main thing with this whole situation that's been happening is that there's been a slow escalation of the amount of actual quote-unquote wokeness in specific games. I don't want to say there's actual wokeness in games, but there just definitely is in specific games. But it really just, because again, I don't hate it, but I'm the person who touts good representation, not representation for the sake of representation. If you do that, that's kind of dumb. And overall, like, it's not good art, because good art doesn't have to represent anything. Good art can represent whatever the fuck they want. I think one of the more powerful pieces that I remember being talked about on stuff like that is the fact that there was one that was made by a specific artist that I can't remember during like an epidemic of AIDS, and he refused to complete it because the completed work wouldn't be as powerful as him not completing it. He even had sketches and artworks and art forms of everything that happened there, but the reason why he didn't complete it was because it was more symbolic of him not being able to do everything he wanted, because I think that he caught AIDS at some point. I don't remember the specific history of it, but I just remember it as being a powerful piece because someone then decided to go in with AI and quote-unquote complete the piece, which is why, again, I personally don't like AI at all right now, because like it not only do these fanboys do use it completely often, but overall just not good. But again, that's my general opinion on the matter. Good representation over bad representation, or representation that's like upsetting or has to be explained or is something like that. It's like a joke. Any good representation doesn't need to be explained as representation. Just kind of happens. And of course, Sweet Baby Inc. has been under a lot of condemnations and a lot of protection by some of the people in the industry and blah, 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 blah. Overall, there's been a lot that's been happening here, and I don't want to go too much into it in this video, but we're going to continue with this specific article just so I can just continue to talk about it. So, what is the quote that they're pulling out here? Well, the quote that they're pulling out here is, are you reinforcing negative gender stereotypes? Are you unnecessarily introducing gender and gender barriers into your code or design? Which, I don't know how you would introduce that into your code. That makes no sense, because you were just coding a video game character. Like, I don't know what that has to do. Like, hitboxes? What does that even mean? The next point is, are you creating a playable female character that is equal in skill and ability to their male peers? Are your female characters equipped with clothing and armor that fits their task? Do they have exaggerated body proportions? And the last one is, when the story allows, do you show male characters who display a full range of emotions, including joy, sadness, and vulnerability? All of those seem, at least on the surface, as okay understandings. The one with the code doesn't make any sense to me because, again, I've worked with code, and, like, how do you, like, make code design have gender or gender barriers? That doesn't make any sense at all. Like, what the fuck does that even mean? But again, on the surface, this seems fine. But then as you dig a little deeper into it, even just like a slightly below the surface level, you realize like this, again, doesn't make any sense, is very up to the interpretation of at least how Xbox perceives it. And overall, it's not good. It's not good design to kind of put limitations like this when you're trying to make a specific point. You know? Like, in this context, there's a lot of things that do that. And again, what does exaggerated proportions even mean? What does the clothing and armor fitting the task even mean? What does the story allow the main characters even mean? Like, that just, like, it's very up into interpretation. And again, this also falls under the fact that Xbox Studios is also under the Sweet Baby Inc. moniker as people that they have worked with, which explains quite a few different, like, tangents and things that they've gone on. Recently, Western game developers have been making a point to relay against, quote, objectifying in games, and are citing unrealistic beauty standards set by fictional characters. Most recently, Stellar Blade has been the subject of such criticism, despite the game's heroine being based off of a real-life model. And that's one of the more interesting things here. They continue to use the same example of Stellar Blade, and we'll just kind of show this on screen here, of how Stellar Blade has, quote, unrealistic body proportions and unrealistic body standards, despite the fact that this is actually based on a true body scanned model, i.e. a model that they used to create and mold the thing around. And if you look at the models for the things that they've used, you can see very little alterations between the 1-2 comparison. We also then have them saying, between Microsoft's developer site and Stellar Blade, it seems there has been a reversal of roles. In recent years, Sony has been criticized for its censorship policies after relocating its gaming business units to California. Now, to me, it seems like there has been an interesting shift, at least in terms of Sony doing these sorts of things. If you notice some of their recent games, like Spider-Man 2, and you could even say Spider-Man, but that still had a ton of actual stuff there. It's hard to say that it's the move from one place to another that's the problem. I think it's more the problem that the industry has a disconnect from what the people want, and that disconnect has been growing further and further without many people realizing it, and for whatever reason, it just kind of wraps around to being just dumb. Especially when it comes to, like, censoring art and censoring freedom of expression when it comes down to it. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, video games aren't freedom of expression. They're not technically art. Well, they are. Whenever you create an object, whenever you create a painting, whenever you create even music or even this video right here, this video is technically a form of art. And it's a form of self-expression that allows a person to give an interpretation of their life or an interpretation of their worldview onto the world. Make it a physical or digital or a representation of what it means to be a person, which is why, again, I also despise AI art, because you can't give life to something that apparently doesn't perceive life in the same way or was never technically alive to begin with. Again, that might change differently or drastically. It's hard to say. But overall, right, the one reason why I did want to talk about this article is this last couple of paragraphs here, saying the following. Gamers have been more vigilant in the recent weeks following an attempted harassment campaign initiated by an employee of Sweet Baby Inc. against a Steam curator and his personal account. The controversy has spilled over from the employee's actions to a wider conversation about narrative consultation in video games. You can check out an archive of Microsoft's developer plays, including their comments about female characters here. And that's the important bit as to why I wanted to talk about this article. Most of the other publications that even remotely talk about this sort of thing and talk about Sweet Baby Inc. and talk about the controversy, even in a small tidbit, don't mention some of the actual facts that have been happening. This is the first publication that I have actually seen that addresses the problem more or less directly. They say that it wasn't actually the people of the Steam curator page that started this whole transaction and these whole dominoes to fall, and that's kind of true. It's never actually started by the person that they say it is. The people that are trying to win, quote-unquote, are the ones that are trying to fix that, quote-unquote. The whole biggest thing that I'm trying to talk about here is that I mentioned this to a friend of mine, but if you have to get consultation onto your art, that might not be the best art, unless specifically that art is being made for a specific person, not for an audience to view, because an audience will always have differing opinions. The joke of how do you get an interpretation of the Torah, or how do you get a recipe for something, or how do you get people to disagree? What was the joke? It was like, I don't remember. It's something you ask, how do you get 10 opinions? You ask 9 rabbis. That's the question. Yeah. How do you get 10 opinions? You ask 9 rabbis. Because each person will have a different interpretation of it. But why 9? Well, other than it being a funny joke, it's also very true. Some people can just change their opinions depending on how you talk to them and depending on the situation that the person is put in. It doesn't matter over at the end of the day where you lie at this whole spectrum thing or whatever. To me, I don't care, and most people just don't care enough about these things to really push those things out. We want a good representation of art. And I know that that's super subjective, super intrinsic to the values that we have been pushed upon and blah, blah, blah. But if I bring up this quote often, and this quote I brought up in the last Sweet Baby Inc. video. And that quote is about comedy and about Duckman. Again, if you've seen Duckman, the show, it applies to so many different things. Saying how the way that he says it, I can't remember it off the top of my head, but the quote, the part of the quote that always sticks with me is demand to be challenged, to be offended, to be treated like thinking, reasoning adults, and raise yourself and children to do the same. That part of the quote always sticks with me because you need to demand to be challenged intellectually, or you need to demand to be challenged in a way that's different to the views that you have in order to, not fall under one side or the other of the extremes. That's why I tend to surround myself with people of differing opinions, people who might not have specific things. That's why I try to keep up with people, and that's why I try to keep myself centered and aligned with how I believe things should be. And yeah, certainly, I might not have the best worldview. In fact, I believe I don't have the best worldview. I think that sometimes I could be a piece of shit. But that's how life works. You learn, you adapt, you overcome, and you make it fun, but also realistic. You need to set these standards that not everything is meant for you. You need to set the understanding that not everything is going to be about you. And once you understand that, you realize all of these other people, they just want it to be about them. And they don't care. But you know what I'm fine with? I'm fine with being a side character. I'm fine with being the one in the sidelines, to be a support. Because at the end of the day, the supports always go underappreciated, but they're necessary. And they are good. But yeah, again, to get into the whole Sweet Baby Inc. harassment campaign thing would take way too much longer than in this video, and this one's meant to be quick, talking about this article and giving my opinions on this. So, what are my opinions on this article? Well, more positive than other ones. Again, literally, when everyone's talking about these sort of Sweet Baby Inc. stuff, they don't talk about this. Like, this is the first article that I've seen in the time that I've been looking into this, even a little bit, that has actually talked about the harassment campaign, that has actually talked about the people who are against the, quote-unquote anti-woke people. The people who are, talking about the actual issues in the gaming industry right now. Because the other ones are just being apologetic, and the other ones are just containing it. And I don't really like that. My art is what I enjoy, and what I enjoy is video games. So, yeah. Anyway, this video is probably all helter-skelter and weird, and quite honestly, I think I got a little too deep into it, but quite frankly, I'm very passionate about art, and I'm very passionate about video games, so I like all things creative, and I want creativity to thrive over anything else. Just makes sense. Overall, thank you so much for watching this episode of I Rant Into a Microphone about something or other weird that I found on the internet. My name is GamePenguin21. Again, 1K by the end of the year. Twitch.tv/GamePenguin21 and links to Bandcamp and music down below. Thank you so much for watching again, and a peace off.